All right, let's dive into the world of HPL Electric and Power, specifically their Q2 performance for fiscal year 2025. We've got their press release, the detailed financials, an independent auditor's review, and even a presentation they made for an investor call. By the time we're done, you'll understand not just what they did this quarter, but how they fit into the big picture of where energy is headed.
Yeah, and looking at these sources, it's clear HPL wants to be the go-to company in India for electrical equipment. We're talking everything metering, both traditional and smart meters. Switch gears, lighting, wires and cables, even fans.
You're right, their investor presentation really emphasizes that one-stop shop idea. And they're not just offering these products, they've got some serious market share, like 50% for those on-load changeover switches and 20% when it comes to electric meters. Oh, and they're the fifth largest LED lighting manufacturer in India.
That's impressive. 7 manufacturing facilities, 2 R&D centers.
Yeah.
They're putting their money where their mouth is when they talk about innovation.
Okay, so let's get into the numbers then. Their Q2 revenue jumped 20.51% year over year, landing at 422.32 crore. And for the first half of the fiscal year, they're at 815.23 crore. But what really catches my eye is the EBITDA. It's up a whopping 28.39% to 60.58 crore in Q2. And even more interesting, that EBITDA margin is expanding.
Now, that's a key point. It basically means they're getting better at turning revenue into actual profit. It's not just selling more, it's selling smarter. Their investor presentation points to their strong order book as a big factor here. We're talking over 3,500 crore in orders as of November 9th. And get this, 95% of that is coming from their metering systems and services segment. That gives them a pretty clear picture of where their revenue is coming from in the next few quarters.
So it sounds like metering is their bread and butter right now, especially with that order book. When you break down the numbers, metering systems and services had a 32.09% year-on-year revenue growth, and their presentation makes it very clear this is driven by the huge demand for smart meters. In fact, 99% of their meter order book is for smart meters.
And that makes perfect sense given what's happening across India's energy sector. The government's pushing for those smart grid technologies, and HPL is riding that wave. They're not just reacting, they're setting themselves up to be a leader in this transition.
Their other segment, consumer, industrial, and services, also grew a respectable 8.52% year over year.
Right, but there are some interesting details there. Their cables saw a huge jump, like 57.5% growth, and domestic switchgear is up over 34.5%. It's a little bit of a warning sign, though. Their lighting segment is facing price pressure across the whole industry. It's something to keep in mind as we go deeper.
Okay, so let's talk about this smart meter revolution everyone's buzzing about. It sounds futuristic, but it's happening now, right?
Absolutely. This isn't some sci-fi movie. It's a real change in how we think about electricity, from generation to distribution and consumption. India's Ministry of Power has this plan to install something like 25 to 30 crore smart meters across the whole country. We're talking a massive market here, and HPL is in a great spot to grab a big piece of it.
It really could be a game changer, not just for HPL, but for the entire power sector. But before we go any further, can you break down why these smart meters are such a big deal?
One of the biggest reasons they're getting so much attention is because they can help solve some of the financial problems that Indian power distribution companies, the discoms, are facing. You see, traditional meters, those ones we're all used to seeing, rely on manual readings. Someone has to physically go out and check the meter. And that system is prone to errors and inefficiencies. And those errors can lead to billing discrepancies and revenue leakage for those discoms.
So instead of waiting for someone to check the meter every month, smart meters send data directly to the discoms in real time. More accurate billing, less waste, and potentially lower costs for everyone.
Exactly. This shift creates a huge opportunity for companies like HPL. And their track record in metering, combined with what we see in their current order book, shows they're ready to capitalize on it.
It sounds like smart meters could really boost HPL's revenue and profitability, especially if you consider that they can probably charge more for a smart meter compared to a traditional one.
Right. They're in a good position to benefit from this trend.
It's amazing to think about the ripple effect, not just for HPL, but for the entire power grid and how we use energy in India. It's a pretty exciting time to be watching this all unfold.
It really is. And speaking of exciting advancements, HPL isn't stopping at smart meters. They're already looking ahead to integrating 5G technology.
Now that's thinking ahead. 5G and smart meters, it's like they're on the cutting edge of a tech revolution in the power sector. But how does 5G even impact an electrical equipment company? I'm still trying to wrap my head around that.
It's a fascinating area with a ton of potential. We have to remember 5G isn't just about faster internet on our phones. It's about creating this interconnected web where devices can talk to each other instantly. And that has huge implications for how we manage and distribute electricity.
So imagine every smart meter equipped with 5G is constantly sending and receiving information from the power grid. We'd have up to the second information on energy use and demand across the entire grid.
Exactly. That level of real-time data could totally revolutionize how we manage electricity. We could optimize grid operations, balance loads better to prevent those blackouts, and even integrate renewable sources like solar and wind seamlessly.
And HPL, with their expertise in smart meters, they're in a perfect spot to lead this 5G powered future. They're not just waiting for it to happen, they're actively building it.
Their presentation highlights how they plan to use their knowledge of power solutions and their strong network of partners to develop these 5G-enabled products and services for all sorts of industries.
Yeah.
They see 5G as a key driver of India's digital transformation, and they're ready to capitalize on that.
It's clear they're not putting all their eggs in one basket. They're thinking long-term and diversifying to stay ahead of the curve. But their investor call presentation also had some interesting insights into their shorter-term plans and expectations.
From what I gathered, their management team is very optimistic about HPL's growth trajectory. They're especially excited about the potential of the smart meter market. And they're committed to fostering a culture of innovation within the company.
Yeah, they specifically talked about investing in advanced machinery and cutting-edge tech. They're serious about staying ahead of the curve and boosting their production capabilities.
And they emphasize their focus on executing that current order book quickly, ensuring a smooth flow of revenue. They've got a plan, and they're wasting no time putting it into action.
It's encouraging to see that proactive mindset and commitment to delivering on their promises. It paints a pretty positive picture of HPL's prospects.
But remember, every company faces challenges, so let's look at some potential hurdles HPL might run into as they navigate this changing energy landscape.
First off, the electrical equipment market is incredibly competitive. HPL isn't the only one trying to get a piece of the pie. There are tons of domestic and international companies all vying for a foothold in this sector.
Exactly. So HPL will need to constantly innovate, keep their prices competitive, and really nurture those relationships with their customers. This isn't a market where you can just sit back and relax.
Another challenge could be the unpredictable nature of raw material prices. Like most manufacturers, HPL relies on things like copper, aluminum, and steel. Any fluctuations in the cost of those materials could impact their bottom line.
Managing their supply chain effectively and minimizing the impact of those price swings will be critical for their long-term success.
And then there's the regulatory landscape. The power sector in India is subject to a lot of government oversight. Any changes in policies or regulations could have a big impact on HPL's operations.
They'll need to be agile and ready to adapt to any changes in the regulatory environment. That'll help them stay compliant and minimize any disruptions to their business.
Despite all those potential challenges, it seems like HPL is in a pretty good spot to navigate them. They have a solid track record, a clear vision for the future, and a management team that's clearly committed to innovation and growth.
It's going to be fascinating to see how they continue to evolve and expand their presence in this industry.
But let's not lose sight of the bigger picture. HPL's success isn't just about their own bottom line. They're playing a vital role in shaping India's energy future.
Exactly. They're helping build the infrastructure that's needed to support economic growth and improve the quality of life for millions of people.
Like their focus on smart meters, it aligns perfectly with the government's vision of creating a smarter and more efficient power grid for the whole country.
And by embracing those cutting-edge technologies like 5G, they're pushing the boundaries of what's possible in this sector. It's really a story about innovation, progress, and the power of technology.
And it's a story that's still being written. There's so much more to explore about HPL, their strategy, and their role in the evolving landscape of Indian power.
But before we dive deeper, let's take a quick break.
We were just talking about how HPL is in such a good spot to take advantage of the shift towards smart meters in India. What really stood out to me in that investor presentation was how they're not just selling the product, they're selling a solution to the problems that those discoms are facing.
It's a really smart approach. When they focus on the benefits for those power distribution companies, like reducing losses, getting more accurate billing, and improving their financial position, HPL becomes more than just a vendor. They become a real partner. It's not just about a quick sale. They're in it for the long haul.
Yeah, that seems to be a recurring theme with them building those long-term relationships. It's clear they're not just chasing short-term gains.
Right, and you can see that when you look at their history. They've got these long-standing relationships with state and central utilities, plus their strong pre-qualification credentials, all that gives them a real edge in this market. They've put in the work, and now they're in a great position to benefit.
So they've got the experience, the expertise, and the connections to really make a difference in this smart meter space. But earlier we talked about their lighting segment facing some headwinds. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on how that could play out?
Well, the investor presentation does acknowledge those industry-wide price pressures. It's definitely something you could keep an eye on.
Yeah, it makes sense. Even with their metering systems and services segment doing so well, if the lighting market takes a dip, it could offset some of those gains.
That's a good point. It really highlights the importance of diversification. HPL is making smart moves by focusing on that high-growth smart meter market. But they can't ignore potential challenges in their other segments. Finding that balance is key.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit and talk about those plans for 5G integration. I have to admit, it's a little hard for me to grasp how 5G will impact an electrical equipment company. Can you shed some light on that for me?
Of course, 5G has implications that go way beyond just faster downloads on our phones. It's all about creating this hyper-connected network where devices can communicate with each other instantly. And when you apply that to the power sector, it opens up a whole world of possibilities.
So imagine every smart meter powered by 5G, constantly talking to the power grid. We're talking real-time data on energy consumption and demand, just flowing back and forth.
Exactly. And that kind of real-time data flow could revolutionize how we manage electricity. Think about it: more efficient grid operations, better load balancing to prevent those blackouts, and it could even make it easier to integrate renewable energy sources like solar and wind power.
And this is where HPL comes in. They're already leading the way in smart meters. Add 5G to the mix, and they have the potential to be right at the forefront of this whole shift.
Absolutely. And their presentation highlighted how they plan to use their expertise in power solutions, along with their network of partners, to develop those 5G-enabled products and services. And not just for smart meters, they're looking at applications across a whole range of industries.
So it seems like they really understand that 5G is going to be a huge driver of India's digital transformation, and they're positioning themselves to be a part of that.
It's a bold move, but it makes sense when you consider the potential of 5G.
Now, beyond smart meters and 5G, HPL is also putting a lot of emphasis on growing their consumer business. That includes things like non-utility metering, switchgear, lighting, and those cables and wires we talked about earlier. What's their strategy there?
They're taking a multi-pronged approach. They want to enhance their distribution reach and build stronger relationships with retailers. They're also investing in brand-building initiatives. And of course, they're constantly developing new and innovative products.
And it looks like they're backing that up with action. They mentioned plans to significantly expand their retailer network, aiming to reach 1,000 retailers by March 2025. Plus, they're investing in marketing campaigns, boosting their social media presence, and even hosting events to connect with distributors and retailers.
They recognize that the consumer market in India is huge. It offers tremendous growth potential, especially with the economy growing so rapidly. By expanding their reach in this segment, they can diversify their revenue and potentially create more stability for the future.
There's another interesting point in their presentation. They highlight the shorter working capital cycle of their consumer business compared to their metering operations. Can you explain what that means and why it matters?
Sure, think of the working capital cycle as the time it takes for a company to convert their investments, like inventory and resources, into actual cash. A shorter cycle means they're getting their money back faster, which is a good sign for their overall financial health.
So by growing their consumer business, they're not just diversifying their revenue, they could actually be improving their financial performance as well.
Exactly. It fits perfectly with their overall goal of achieving sustainable growth and generating long-term value for their shareholders.
While that investor call presentation paints a very positive picture, we have to remember that every company faces challenges. What potential hurdles do you see for HPL as they navigate this evolving landscape?
Well, one challenge is definitely the intense competition within the electrical equipment market. HPL isn't the only player in the game. They'll need to keep innovating, maintain competitive pricing, and cultivate those strong relationships with their customers if they want to stay ahead of their rivals.
It sounds like they can't afford to get complacent. They need to stay agile and adaptable to thrive in this kind of dynamic market.
Absolutely. And another challenge could be the volatility of raw material prices. Like we discussed earlier, HPL is vulnerable to those fluctuations in the cost of materials like copper and aluminum. So managing their supply chain effectively and minimizing the impact of those price swings will be really important.
And let's not forget about the regulatory environment in India. The power sector is heavily regulated, so any changes in government policies could significantly impact HPL's operations.
Right, they'll need to be ready to adjust their strategies accordingly.
Those are all valid concerns. But based on what we've seen in their financials and presentations, HPL seems to be well equipped to handle them. They have a solid track record, a clear vision for the future, and a management team that seems genuinely committed to innovation and growth.
I agree. It seems like they're in a good position to navigate those potential hurdles.
Okay, so let's take a step back for a minute and think about the broader implications of HPL's journey. Their success isn't just about their own bottom line. They're playing a role in shaping India's energy future.
That's a really important point. As a leading provider of electrical equipment, HPL is contributing to the development of India's power infrastructure. And that's essential for driving economic growth and improving the lives of millions of people across the country.
Their focus on smart meters, for example, aligns perfectly with the government's vision of a more efficient and sustainable power grid.
And by embracing cutting-edge technologies like 5G, they're helping to build a more connected and technologically advanced energy ecosystem in India. It's a pretty exciting time to be witnessing this transformation.
It really is. But before we get too carried away with the excitement, I want to touch on another aspect of HPL's operations that caught my eye: their commitment to training and development. They seem to be going above and beyond to invest in the future of the industry.
You're talking about those awareness programs and industrial visits, right? It's great to see that they're not just focused on profits. They're taking steps to empower the next generation of electricians and engineers.
Exactly. They're taking a holistic approach, not only building their own business, but also contributing to the growth and development of the whole industry.
It speaks to their long-term vision. They understand that a thriving industry benefits everyone involved.
Now, with all this information in mind, let's go back to that question we posed earlier. What are your predictions for HPL's future? Given everything we've discussed, are you optimistic?
I am, but cautiously optimistic.
Yeah.
They seem to have a solid strategy, a capable leadership team, and a really good understanding of the market dynamics.
But like you said before, the future is never certain. They'll definitely face challenges and unexpected twists and turns along the way.
That's just the nature of business.
Yeah.
It's a constantly changing landscape. But I think HPL has the tools and the mindset to adapt and thrive, even when things are uncertain.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive into HPL Electric and Power, what are the key takeaways our listeners should keep in mind?
I think the biggest takeaway is that HPL is a company that's moving forward. They're not content with just maintaining the status quo. They're actively looking for opportunities to innovate, grow, and contribute to the transformation of India's energy sector.
They're not just riding the wave of change, they're helping to create it. And that's something worth paying attention to.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
But remember, this is just our analysis based on the information we have. It's important for everyone to do their own research, dig deeper into HPL's story, and form their own conclusions.
Don't just take our word for it. Explore their financials, read those investor presentations, and follow their progress closely.
And as you do that, remember to stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged. Ask questions, challenge assumptions, and think critically about the information you come across.
That's how you become a more informed investor and a more engaged citizen.
And who knows, maybe someday you'll be the one leading a company like HPL into the future.
You know, it's incredible to think that HPL is playing such a big part in something as huge as India's energy transformation.
Yeah, and it's not just about the technology itself. That commitment to training programs, raising awareness, giving people hands-on experience, it shows they're investing in the human side of things too.
Absolutely. By helping to develop that next generation of electricians and engineers, they're building a skilled workforce that can support the growth of the entire sector.
They're not just building a business, they're building a whole ecosystem.
And it seems to be working. Their financial performance, their vision for the future, their embrace of these new technologies, it all points to a company that's not just succeeding, but contributing to something much bigger.
I think that's a great point to wrap up on. HPL is a company worth keeping an eye on, not just for investors, but for anyone interested in India's energy future.
So as we close out this deep dive, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from this conversation?
I hope they come away with a sense of possibility, The energy sector is changing so quickly, and HPL is a perfect example of how companies can adapt, innovate, and thrive in that kind of environment.
And I hope they feel inspired to continue exploring this on their own. We've only scratched the surface here. There's so much more to learn about HPL, the electrical equipment industry, and what the future holds for energy in India.
Exactly. Don't just take our word for it. Dig into those financial statements, read their investor presentations, and track their progress. Form your own opinions, draw your own conclusions.
That's what's so great about these deep dives. It's just a starting point, something to spark your own curiosity and exploration.
So until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and never stop exploring the world around you.
That's all for this deep dive into HPL Electric and Power. We hope you found it insightful and thought-provoking.
And as always, we encourage you to do your own research and form your own conclusions about HPL and their role in the future of India's energy sector.
Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and keep exploring.